right, good evening, everyone. Want to call this meeting of the Caldwell County Board of Commissioners to order for Monday, October the 10th, 2022. I'd like to welcome those who are in attendance in our audience, as well as those who are now joining us by TV. At this time, we will have our invocation, and that'll be led by Pastor Leo Fair from the First United Methodist Church in Granite Falls. Welcome, Pastor, and then our Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Commissioner Donnie Potter. So,
let's pray. Holy and mighty God and gracious God, we love you and adore you today. We come to do the business of Caldwell County and ask that you would pour out your spirit, your leadership, your guidance, your wisdom on us. Give us mercy where it is needed for those in our community in need. Give us wisdom and guidance to do what is right and fair. Lead this county, protect its citizens, protect its leaders. We pray it in Jesus' mighty name. And all God's children said,
Amen. Amen. Please face the flag. Salute. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you, everyone. Are there any amendments to our agenda this evening?
No, sir. For the first time in a long time, we stand as presented.
All right, so hearing no amendments, what's the pleasure of the board in adopting our agenda?
Mr. Chair, I move that we accept this evening's agenda as the county manager and clerk have presented to us.
Any other discussion or comment? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that carries unanimously. And that leads us to our first item on the agenda this evening, a presentation by VAYA Health, and Mr. Dustin Burleson is with us. So welcome.
Thank you.
You've brought help.
Well, no, he was grabbing his laptop. So, good evening. Thank you for having me today. And I think, you know, the biggest thing that has changed a little bit since we were last here is the North Carolina DHHS announced that the tailored plan would be postponed until April. And so originally we had been planning for it to be launched in December of this year. And so I think VAYA does support that decision. It gives us more time for a smooth transition to make sure that everything's ready to go once we go live with that. So just wanted to mention that, and also wanted to mention that, you know, what kind of came out of part of Tailored Plan is that each of our counties in our 31 is required to have what's called a crisis response collaborative. And so I know historically Caldwell used to have one of those where it was probably called a CEDI. And so that's something that Ms. Anna Martin and myself have kind of got together and sent some invitations out. And we invited, I think, most of you commissioners, if not all. But, you know, up to your discretion if you want to attend that or not. We just wanted to have it out there, especially for the initial meeting. The whole purpose of that is to really bring everyone together to talk about, to identify how's the crisis system look today, where are the gaps, where are the issues that we can address, whether it be the provider or whatever. So just wanted to acknowledge those two things before I started. I think the biggest thing that we're doing is we're walking around to our commissioners' meetings is we want to just acknowledge the current challenges across the state, really, and really even probably the nation. And that's the challenge of staffing, which it's not just in mental health or behavioral health, it's not just in healthcare in general, and it's not just in really anything. I think what we saw since, you know, COVID came is a lot of people, and particularly in behavioral health, have left the profession, and so they're no longer providing whatever type of health care they were providing. Agencies have shut down and closed doors because they had a virtual only option. We've had health plans through standard plans come in and they hire staff in these communities. And so what we know is that the workforce is stretched, right? And so we want to acknowledge that, and we want to talk a little bit about what VAYA is doing to kind of help with that piece. And so one of the things that we're doing is trying to stabilize walk-in centers. So what a walk-in center is here in Caldwell County is RHA has a facility that you don't have to have an appointment for. You can literally walk into their door and receive a service or an assessment. And so we have those in all 31 counties. That is a staple of kind of what we've tried to provide. And if you think about comprehensives, you know, we have all the state funding funneled through our MCOs. And a way to serve as many people as possible is we streamline that funding down through the comprehensive provider, RHA, and so they serve anybody that walks in the door. And so it's the best way to really utilize the funding and bang for your buck, if you will. So we've increased rates with that as well. If you guys look, I think slide number 5, it talks about more strategies to address the challenges. We've increased our reimbursement rates across all service areas. And the idea is to help with recruitment and retention for providers. We know that providers, particularly in rural areas, have a hard time hiring staff that's licensed for clinical staff, and also retaining that, because what we notice is maybe they're having to hire from a university area, and so commuting might be an issue, or they may work there as their first job and then they go back to where they're actually wanting to be. So what we're trying to do is incentivize our providers through rate reimbursement, so we've increased rates that way. We've targeted all different types of tailored funding opportunities to help providers and really be able to expand their service array, because we want to make sure that we've got the right amount of services that's been identified in all of our counties. The next slide is, I think I was here not too long ago talking about the Child and Family Specialty Plan, which was a foster care waiver that's an additional waiver coming from the state. They're trying to carve out from Taylor Plan, and I appreciate you guys for supporting the delay of that and it being more regionalized. What VAYA has done, along with the other LME MCOs across the state, is we've come together and developed what's called a statewide child and youth improvement initiative. So we've took all the feedback. We went and talked to all of our DSSs in our 31 counties, as did the other MCOs, and we said, what makes this work that you do, which we know is really hard work and really important work, how would it be easier? What can the MCOs do to make that easier? And they talked about things like, you know, one of the challenges is if you are on a border county in between MCOs, for example, Caldwell might be a good example, set in between a partners county and a VAYA county. If a kid transitions from one to the other, there's sometimes a delay in getting that authorization for services or something like that. That could be maybe a 1 or 2 day hiccup. So what we've agreed to with all of our MCOs is a pass-through. So it's just like if you're going to a hospital inpatient stay, we have a 3-day pass-through where no authorization or anything's needed. So you go right into that. The other piece, if you think about, you know, if Will were here from DSS, he would say that one of the challenges is when we're trying to find placement for a kid, that if we're looking at several providers in the residential area, they're going to have to fill out several different applications for being admitted to that. And so what we have really tried to do is do a universal application. So you do one application, everybody has to accept that application. So that's just another one of the key areas that I think we're trying to do to improve. We have a group called Benchmarks that is working with all of our DSS directors to basically, figure out how do we communicate the same, what's some common language and shared understandings that we have. And so we've got all kinds of subgroups that our DSS directors across our 31 are really involved in. We're also reducing out of network agreements. So if we've got a kid in Wilmington, which we know sometimes a kid has to go that far because, again, beds are limited. Used to, if that provider was not contracted with VAYA, we would have to ask them to do the paperwork to become contracted. And now we're trying to reduce and eliminate the need for that. And so I think, there's more listed on here, but to be brief, I just want to recognize there's a lot of things that we're doing. We're taking all the feedback and we're trying to implement this across the state. So not just really VAYA. Slide number 8. This shows a map of the co-locating our care managers at VAYA are with DSSs. And so here in Caldwell County, we've got a care manager who is at the DSS office. She attends staffings, and these aren't people that have actually the kids that they're staffing with. They're there staffing all the kids and trying to help them navigate this complicated system, which we know that it is. And so we're doing that. We think 28 of our 31 have an embedded care manager there now. So that's really good. We've also got a escalation protocol for DSS to notify VAYA leadership of any acute high-risk cases with 24/7 access through our call center, which is something that is really helpful, I think. Also, we are increasing our bed capacity. So for crisis beds across the state, these are VAYA-only kids that we prepay to buy these beds. So when a DSS gets a kid and they are going to be sleeping on a DSS couch that night, that we can loop them into one of those crisis beds. And as many as we have, and we're in the 70s, but as many as we have, it still isn't enough. And that's the thing. There's so many kids that's really complicated and kind of all that's going on with them. And it's really difficult. We know there's tons of gaps in child services across the state. But we are working to try to address those. Slide number 10, just to be brief here. One of the things that we have done that I think is really important is on therapeutic foster care, we've almost doubled the rate. And so what we did, the reasoning behind this is we want to keep kids in the community at all, if at all possible. So we know that we have tough kids sometimes that go to that level of care. And so we're trying to incentivize this particular family in therapeutic foster care to keep this difficult kid by paying them more money, to work with them, to keep them in the community rather than to go to a residential setting, which we know typically those kids stay in the residential system for a while. So we're trying to put wraparound services, all kinds of things there. Also trying to recruit more therapeutic foster care families, which is sometimes difficult as well. And then I think just the last thing, to be brief, I know there's already conversations happening on the opioid settlement funds. Meetings are happening. I appreciate you guys and letting VAYA be at the table. This is just some of the things that our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Zen, has put together that basically these are things that you guys probably already know, the two different options of how to use this funding. I think the key takeaway that we want to just say is I think the reason we like to be at the table is to help you as you have these conversations in all of your counties, make sure that from a provider network standpoint, that we're not creating something that already exists that we can pay through our federal dollars. And so the other piece is to make sure that we can kind of help from a provider network standpoint, that it's sustainable, and to think about it from that way, because that is a lot of what we do is develop programs and things like that. So that is really what I've got. And so I'm certainly open to questions from you all. And if not, I really appreciate your time.
So I've got a couple questions. The Taylor plans,
Yes.
the state moves it to April,
Yes, sir.
but are they gonna let the MCOs manage it? Or are they gonna try to do this private thing that they talked about?
Yeah. So I think there was a couple different reasonings for the move. You know, VAYA was ready to go from the MCO as far as they do a readiness review. Some MCOs probably weren't as ready as we were, so we were ready to go live. The decision really came down to it being a little rushed, and they just wanted to give more time because we know when standard plan rolled out, it was shaky. I mean,
Correct.
people were auto-enrolled, they didn't know where they could go and where they couldn't. So I think this is a really good thing. It gives
Okay.
more time, and, you know, VAYA will continue to be the Taylor plan.
Perfect. And the other question was, where are we on the, I know we had talked about the kind of off subject to what you're talking about here, but it was the laptops or the iPads. Y'all were
Yes.
gonna- Where are we
Yeah.
at on that?
Yeah, great question. So what I've done with that is I've talked to our contract manager with RHA. It's not going to be a quick process because it does take some technology development on RHA's
Sure.
side. They're not ready to go like some of our other providers were. But they are well aware. I let our Vice President, Donald Roos, know that Caldwell County is really bought in to wanting these iPads and these first responders to have those. So I think hopefully you will be one of our first counties once we're ready to go with that.
And what we had talked about, to catch y'all up to speed, is they've done some work with couple other counties across the state where law enforcement officer, probably lieutenant or sergeant on shift, or some supervisor at EMS, those type of people, the first responders would have an iPad, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, if they come across somebody that needs help, they can actually get on that iPad on the side of the road or wherever they are and talk to somebody at RHA, and they can do an assessment right there and say, hey, you bring them here or you take them there or wherever. So it would eliminate some of the going to the hospital and sitting and waiting for 12 hours to figure out what you're going to do with them. So, well, in a perfect world, that's what would happen. So.
Right, yeah. So it's really to make sure we have a pretty good disposition of where to go next, whereas filling our EDs. And I think that was the major purpose originally for it. But I think there's all kinds of reasons that they're helpful.
Last question was, I know we'd had a brief discussion about guaranteeing Caldwell some beds if we paid for them. Did you find anything out about that?
You can do that. So what I'll need to do with that is put you guys in touch with Donald, our VP, and talk more specifically of what that would look like. Now, he did just kind of say, these three counties, Caldwell, McDowell, Alexander, already have priority to these beds. So, but if you feel like it's not enough, we can certainly do that. But if there's beds available, those three counties get the priority.
Okay.
Because that's how it was developed.
Okay.
So just let me know what you guys decide. If you feel like you would like to, I'll give you more specifics, and I'll schedule a meeting together for us.
Yeah, the conversation here, just for the rest of the commissioners, was that there were some beds at RHA that were not being utilized. And my question was to them, could we, set those 4 rooms? I think it was 4 rooms, wasn't it? 4?
Potentially, I don't recall.
However many, it was 4 or 5 rooms that we could set aside just for Caldwell County residents. So that's what that question was and what brought that up. So the answer is yes, we can do that. So.
Yeah, and typically what happens, just to say, so, these beds are really there for those 3 counties, right? If there's beds available that these 3 counties aren't using, then that's when they would accept from other counties, right? But I think anytime there's beds available, these counties get priority. Now, sometimes beds are full. That's just the nature of it, too.
Yep.
So.
Yep. Yeah, I get that. But the answer is yes, we can.
It is.
That was
yes,
a good
absolutely.
answer. So we'll have some discussion about that amongst ourselves.
Okay.
Thank you for finding out about
Yeah,
that.
I appreciate
Thank you
it.
for all your help, too. You've
Yeah,
been
any more-
a great resource.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, sir. We appreciate you coming by.
Well, I appreciate y'all for having me.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
bud.
you.
Take care.
That leads us to our next item, which is a decision in reference to the Sheriff's Office reclassification for a lobby officer. And Major Bean is with us this evening.
Evening, Commissioners,
How are you?
County Manager, Madam Clerk. I stand before the board tonight requesting a sworn deputy sheriff position for the Sheriff's Office to be attached to the Administrative Division. This position, we've been using it since June of 2020 as a lobby officer. He's the face of the Sheriff's Office. He is who the citizens see when they walk in. Since we've been using it, to my knowledge, we have had no citizen complaints of having to wait for service. Before we had this position, if a citizen walked into the office to file a report or something of that nature, sometimes they had to wait for a deputy to come all the way from Buffalo Cove. This officer is going to be a multifaceted, he does everything. Right now, we have Jason Rosenberger in that position. He serves warrants, he fingerprints, he'll empty the trash if you ask him to. I seen him arresting somebody in the parking lot the other day, but the budget impact of this new position is only going to be the salary. He's already equipped. It'll be $47,707.26. But the sheriff is requesting this position, and I'm going to present it to the board, and I'm ready to answer any questions you may have about it.
All right. Anybody have any questions for the major?
It's been my understanding that it's taken a lot of the pressure off of the road deputies, too.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's,
I think he takes between 10 and 15 reports a day.
oh, yeah.
Is this person gonna be the same person all the time, or are you gonna use somebody that's on light duty and swap them out to do
No,
that?
it'll be a assigned position. It'll be Jason for right now.
Well, my comment about it is, and I hadn't talked to anybody at the sheriff's office much about it, but a few years ago, I had an incident in another county. And I know when I went to that county to report that incident that I was met with an officer there. It was Iredell County. And they staged one there in the office. And I thought that was pretty neat that you could immediately.
Yes, Sergeant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I thought it
been
was
needed
pretty
for a
neat
while.
then. And so I applaud the effort of trying to move that along in our county. And I certainly see the benefit in it because you're getting immediate service with speaking to a deputy.
Yeah.
And a lot of people want to be able to talk to a deputy. They don't want to talk to a receptionist or somebody there at the front office area. They want to talk to the person that's got a badge and that's going to help them. So,
Or have to wait for that person to come to them.
yeah.
Yeah, and he's actually an extra added layer of security too, because anybody can walk in that front office, and generally, there's no sworn personnel right around there. So
Right.
And you couldn't have
Also-
picked a better person to do it. He's
Well,
really
I
good
think,
with
didn't we
public.
honor him last month for
We
some
did.
sort of Officer of the Year recognition?
we did.
He's great with the public.
So anyway, so
I think it'll be a lot more efficient. I think it's been needed for some time.
It has. It has. It'd be
Yes,
great
sir.
for customer service, I know that.
yeah. Well, what's the pleasure of the board in adopting this reclassification for the officer in the lobby?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we reclassification of the lobby position for the sheriff's office that he's requesting this evening.
All right, any other discussion or comment? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that motion carries. So thank you, Major.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Major.
Thank you.
Next is our resolution for adopting our new county flag. And so our county manager, Mr. Donald Duncan, is going to lead us in that discussion.
Chairman and Commissioners, I'm filling in for Ms. Paige Counts, our PIO. She's out with medical leave, and we wish her a speedy recovery. But before you have a small presentation she put together to show you the current flag and the digital image that we have of that, as opposed to the flag that you guys have been working on. I think I counted 48 different versions. We got something that everybody is satisfied with, and so I appreciate your patience and your input. You have a resolution before you that would make that part of the county's new marketing and rebranding, including our new seal and our new icon, which some of you are wearing tonight on your lapel pins.
All right. So hearing the recommendation, and after how many revisions? 40?
I think it's 43 or 48. I counted the other day.
Revisions on our county flag. I don't know if, Eric, you got anywhere you can post it?
We'll have it on the,
He might want to zoom in on that. So that's what we're looking at voting and adopting a resolution for tonight for our new county flag, and which is just following suit with our rebranding efforts that we've been doing at the county. So we appreciate all the help and effort that's gone into it. And so do I hear a motion that we adopt a resolution in adopting our new county flag?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we adopt the resolution for the new county flag.
All right, any other discussion or comment?
Mr. Chairman, I'll add that all of this work has been done with local staff here, but also by a native of Caldwell County, one of our own, Joy's son, Dustin, and has been just a fantastic person to work with, and, he's give us a good price.
Yeah.
So this hasn't cost the taxpayers very much money to have a professional, first-class redesign done.
All right. Well, we appreciate his efforts in that. So hearing that, I'll call the question. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that motion carries unanimously. And again, thank you for all the efforts, and we look forward to seeing that flying very soon. Jimmy, what's the production time on getting those ordered and getting them here? 3 weeks? Okay. All right. So they'll be here soon. Next is item for decision on our racetrack ordinance and those amendments as we presented a month ago, and we're in that second reading and opportunity of getting to discuss those again. So, Mr. Duncan.
Yes, sir. So our policy now is to have 2 readings on all the ordinances. And so as we presented last month, this will make some minor modifications to allow it to be a little longer season, slightly longer season, and also give them some flexibility if they run into rain delays, things like that. And then they have 4 flexible dates that they can present to us at the first of the year and give us some opportunity to have better racing, more competitive events, and also some track testing there. So, and I thought those gentlemen were on their way here. They had called earlier today and were trying to get out of Asheville to get over here in time, so they must not have made it. But.
All right. Well, so I know that we've been working on that for some time, and trust that commissioners have had an opportunity to read that again. So what's the pleasure of the board this evening in adopting the racetrack ordinance amendments?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we adopt the racetrack ordinance amendments as presented by the county manager.
All right, any other discussion or comment? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that motion carries unanimously as well. That brings us to our 5th item this evening, and Richard Gilliland, our Animal Care Enforcement Director, is with us, and he has some animal care enforcement ordinance amendments for the second presentation again this evening. So welcome.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Chairman, like the county manager just mentioned, this is the second presentation for the ordinances. I'd just like to ask you guys if you have any questions.
All right, anybody have any questions of the ordinances as has been presented?
And I would like to thank Richard and Abby for all their hard work on this and working with our counselor. We did catch one more omission that as part of the new state law, when you have a criminal penalty, you have to list it throughout the ordinance. And we've found a place where we forgot to include that. So the version that you will be signing will have it in there one more time, repeating the same language.
All right, sir. Well, hearing that, what's the pleasure of the board this evening in adopting the Animal Care Enforcement Ordinance Amendment?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we adopt the animal care enforcement ordinance amendments presented tonight.
You know, I'm going to pause and say, Commissioner Potter, I appreciate you speaking up.
Yep, thank you.
All right. Any other discussion or comment? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that motion carries. And we thank you for all your efforts in that, Richard.
Thank you, Chairman.
We really appreciate it. And next we have Dino Dibernardi, our Chief of Emergency Services here, who's going to present us some architectural services for the Schrader Group for looking at our potential new Emergency Operations Center and communications specifically.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman and Board. I will say I'm absolutely delighted to be able to present this to you. It's a culmination of at least 12 years that I know of. We've been working towards this goal. Many of you have taken a personal and professional vested interest in this project. It is for the Emergency Services Facility, which will hold the EOC, Emergency Operations Center, communications, administrations, and an operational component. I'm going to try to make this as brief as possible. Obviously, since we're having a little bit of technical difficulty, you won't be able to see some of the slides. But highlights of this project is we received, greatly due to Representative Dustin Hall and Senator Warren Daniel, but the whole of legislature and government at the state level, some legislative funding, which obviously progressed this program a little bit faster. We've also identified many state partners that would be partnering with us, housed in this facility, as well as partnering with us to secure some other grant funding, some of those being North Carolina Viper, North Carolina Department of Insurance and Office of the State Fire Marshal, as well as North Carolina Emergency Management. There's also obviously key local and regional partners, being consolidation with communications for all of the communication centers in the county, as well as other counties surrounding backup centers are interested, as well as some other alternatives that may be realized as well. We also have 4 additional grant opportunities for this project. But the reason we're here tonight is the selection of a firm that will be handling architectural and engineering services, Schrader Group, based out of Philadelphia, but also regional offices in the state and throughout the country. But this process was definitely one of the most difficult. I will say that the candidates, the groups that came in, as the county manager can attest, there were multiple phenomenal options. Many brought their own unique experiences, but Schrader Group stood apart with their programming and experience. They also presented a plan to truly make this facility one that would last the test of time, not only for space, but technology needs. It is going to be a truly tech-heavy facility, arguably, other than Google itself, the most tech-heavy facility in the county. This feasibility, or this study also includes the feasibility study and needs assessment, which would be the first step. But they have presented a proposal, which I believe you have a copy of in front of you, and I apologize, it is a fairly large document. I'm going to have the gentleman come up and obviously speak to you about their components, but it highlights the overall process and their components. It would need to be approved by the commission to move forward, and this would be the first step towards securing those other partners, securing the additional funding, as well as moving forward with the process itself for the architectural and engineering components of the new facility. I guess I should also back up, the tentative location plan would be for the facility to be located directly adjacent to the new animal care and enforcement facility, as well as the Health and Human Services building, and then diagonal, of course, from the Sheriff's Department. Already on county property, infrastructure already being in place for the technology needs, as well as radio and otherwise. So I'm going to ask them to come up before, I'm sure you guys will also have questions, but if you want to present any of that component from your perspective, and I assume you still want to do that.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that the amount of people that were involved in this decision, and we had 7 good firms, we had 4 that we narrowed it down to in the first cut, that were all 4 capable and qualified, but once we come down to we wanted to interview, we spent an entire day in this room, first half of the day with an architecture firm called ADW, who's very familiar with emergency services across the state. But I had never met the folks from Schrader Group, and they came highly recommended, and Chief Dibernardi also did some follow-ups on reference checks, and the counties that we talked to just could not say enough good things about their projects, and many of them had, what I like to hear, they had extenuating circumstances. Start off with what looked like a simple project, and then COVID hit, other things, funding, et cetera, and the Schrader Group was able to help them work through all that, so that spoke a lot to me about making a project successful under dynamic circumstances that we had. But they, it was, as Dino said, a difficult decision, and luckily we had qualified firms. But out of that survey, we've already selected Mosley Group, who was also an applicant, to help us with the courthouse because they're a better qualified group there. Schrader will help us with this, and I think we'll probably use the other 2 firms in other projects in the future because they all had their own specialty niches that make them unique. And so I'll shut up and let you talk. But
well, good evening. Thank you, Commissioners and Chairman.
Good evening.
Vice Chair, for having me this evening. I'm Harry Pittoni. I'm one of the principals of the firm. I was asked just a kind of brief overview of who we are. And so I come out of the Raleigh office as both county manager and Dino noted, and we are known nationally. This is our craft of emergency management, mission critical partners, mission critical projects. We do extensive work with also, I guess, your project manager, mission critical partners. Craig's with me as well this evening. We are currently working across the state. We have a couple large projects out in Chatham County right now, similar of focus, multidiscipline project of EOC 911 type projects. as I said, you know, some of the projects, and I think we shared the short presentation of work. One of the things that we do want to point out, and from a team standpoint, we're a principal-based firm, so the people that you see, myself, I'm heavily involved in the project beginning to end as a single point of contact and resource to everyone, and work through the project beginning to end. We do, as noted, have a quite extensive workshop project development process that we work through, encourage all stakeholders to be part of that. So, you know, as the project develops, we like to hear from you, as well as all the different emergency management groups that are integral and will eventually be housed in the project. Our overall team, I will say, very experienced. We're working with firms that we've been working with as well throughout the country in various states, the Timmons Group and RMF. We find, you know, these guys, we've sort of all trained them in our process and the work that we do. So it eliminates that learning curve and you know, brings a successful project to us. Wealth of experience, I don't want to get too deep into it, but if there's any questions, I could by all means talk to you about our work in the state and throughout the country. I think as you noted, the first part of this is going to be a feasibility assessment and really develop what the needs are going to be for the project and work through that. I have about I guess a year process of design, and periodically we'll be coming to you for updates and kind of informative where we're at in the process, way before we go to bid or anything of that sort. Any questions?
So did I understand you to say a year to develop this? Okay.
Yeah.
That was one of the things that stood out. Oh, sorry.
One of the things that they highlighted was we expressed the true intent, and obviously with any project, you always have the potential, but one of the true intents of the project team locally and with Schrader Group is to reduce the number of change orders, to reduce the numbers of oversights from the front end. So as they come in and do the feasibility study, they'll literally come in and they gave examples, and this was one of the things that I can say was bragged about extensively by others in the state and in the country. They'll come in and meet with staff, so they'll be on hand to see exchanges during shift changes, for example, and to sit in the comm center and see how the processes work, and to partner with the sheriff's office and you know, the other law enforcement agencies in the county and the state and regional partners to truly see how everything morphs together and how it's not currently, but we would like for it to. And then also integrate the tech component that is currently lacking to true information sharing, for example, with our state and federal partners, which then does open us up to additional funding opportunities through Department of Homeland Security and otherwise. But one of the things, like I started out with, that really made them stand apart, and correct me if I'm wrong though, was their ability to, though it is a very in-depth, lengthy process for the design, and that does include the architectural component, but their design through feasibility up to that true design of the building was to eliminate those challenges that come back and tag on components that cost obviously more than the original presentation on the back end.
Sort of like the animal control, animal.
Yeah, I wasn't, absolutely. And honestly, we use that and the EMS facilities that we just did as examples of learned experiences.
What
and
not to
do. Exactly, just to be honest, what not to do. And they had phenomenal answers that were then corroborated by those follow-up phone calls. And they provided us with a very lengthy list of other places, governments and otherwise. And I will say, though it is in your booklets, but for the public, they have done everything from federal and state partners all the way down to very small localities and everything in between. So the experience that they can draw on, that wealth of knowledge, really did let them stand apart from the other candidates.
So I have a question for maybe you and Donald. Was this not something that needed to be bidded out since we're hiring
It's a
architects?
professional service, so you have to do a solicitation of professional proposals, and that's what we did. And we
Okay.
had 7 applicants. We narrowed that to a group of 4 and then interviewed 2.
All right.
And then, yes, we'll be bid out once we go to the
So
construction.
in the 12 months, you're talking about the feasibility study and the architecture
And the
design of it.
architectural
That's
design.
everything.
Correct.
So we would hopefully
Yeah.
start
Yeah, and
turning dirt, as Chairman Church likes to say, a year from now.
that's the way it's projected.
I'll
Careful.
say this.
He was very careful how he answered it.
I'll
just
say,
kidding you.
I'll say this, and it's interesting, and as we get into the feasibility, really
Yeah.
sets the stage.
Right.
And bringing everyone in, that collaborative effort is so important to understand all the wants and needs of you as a county.
Well, I don't expect to have to build another one of these for a long
No,
time, so we
you're-
want to make
you're-
sure we get it right.
You're
you know.
not wrong. So that will set that stage. The other thing that, and you're a county, obviously, but we still got to go through that approval and permitting process.
Right.
That tends to kind of wag the tail at the end and getting through that permitting
Yeah.
process. But
For the public's knowledge, Donald, what is the cost of this service?
So the feasibility study is $64,000. The construction design would be about, is it 9.9% of the project? And
Okay.
in a competitive market is 10+%. So
Yep.
I was pleasantly surprised to see that number. So I will say this to their credit. Both firms presented a timeline. In my opinion, the more realistic timeline was presented by Schrader Group, and that was the factor for me before we did the follow-up and the reference checks that kind of put the edge ahead of ADW, which is their main
Yeah.
competitor. I would like to see us in the building first quarter of '25. If, maybe before, we're lucky.
Yeah. Interesting, and that's, yeah. And there's some back-end time of that and your cut over, as we get into detail. The transition will take some time, but that puts you right in that final completion of.
And y'all feel
first
comfortable there's
quarter
enough room
25.
in that location to do
Yes, so
all
they
this?
actually presented total of two
Two
real
sketchups,
options.
yeah.
There were
Two
actually
real-
3 or 4 that could be done. Some are variations of each. So yes, there's 2 locations, one directly beside, on the same side of the street as the Animal Care and Enforcement Center, and one on the opposite. Both of those have variations, so you could do single-story, 2-story, 3-story, or whatever version that you had. And another component that they did account for was supply chain, which was a component. And then their ability to assist with securing other funding streams. So obviously with the large pot of money that was established through state legislature, also the North Carolina 911 Board, and then the 4 current grants that are going to be presented to you as the process goes on, there are additional for federal partners. He highlighted the need for permitting. So not only do you have the local being in that location, City of Lenoir and the county, but you also have state and federal permits due to the obviously sensitive nature of some of the equipment, but also FCC with communications, everything down to, electrical and grounding, so.
And you're saying right across the street from
It would
the
be
current
same
HHS
side, it would
building?
be in between the Health and Human Services Building and RHA. It is
Yeah,
current,
right on that.
and it would incorporate
drops off,
that's
where it
correct, and it would
drops off, yeah.
incorporate part of that
Okay.
flattened area that was established there for that.
Yep.
Pending nothing crazy being found, of course, during the site evaluation.
mean, you gonna take our courthouse space up?
So that was actually discussed with different locations, and I think, I don't know what the determining factor was with that.
The Office of Chief Influencer has requested it remain downtown, so unless that changes.
I still don't like that. Still like to have a backup plan right there.
That's certainly a feasible option.
The problem
Yes,
is if
sir.
we don't put it downtown, we don't get the money to build it with.
I know. I don't know if we're gonna build it, we're just gonna try to
Well,
refurbish it.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Any other questions for Mr. Dibernardi or?
When will you get started?
Upon your approval.
Okay. Fair enough.
Well, it'll be a good $61,000 spent,
Yep.
I think.
I agree with
because,
you.
To get it started and identify on the front end a lot of these issues because I can just envision that there are gonna be a lot of issues that some people wouldn't realize.
Yeah, just don't forget the heat and air conditioner system in it.
Yeah, please
Or-
put
or the
heat
curb
and
and
air in.
gutter.
And a big enough one,
I will
too.
provide you with the presentation they provided us when they presented it, and you
That was an
cannot,
inside joke. Nobody else knows that
you
but
cannot
us.
imagine the finite detail
Yeah.
that they explained, including literal measurements of footings and bolt locations, and that's
Well,
not an exaggeration.
That's a good point. That's a fair point, yeah.
We had the opportunity to visit some recently constructed 911 centers, and it's pretty sad when you go to one and the first thing they got's big fans set up on their radio equipment and communications in the room because they missed that, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
This big, nice facility with fans trying to
told
keep things cool.
Well, I think you bring up a good point, Chairman. You and Commissioner Wilkie's involvement in this process to date has been invaluable, and we'd like to see that continue. There are other sites we'd like to go see. We'd like to see Schrader-specific sites.
Right.
Chatham County is under construction. Dare County's just recently finished. Now, that's a long way, but I think it would be worth the drive for us to go visit and see, learn more about the process. We've talked to them on the phone, but it's, not like touching it and feeling it and seeing how they,
Right, and just seeing it.
yep.
Yeah, in Dare County, historically, they don't cut any corners to save any money. They got tons of money down there, so they usually gonna build something really nice. I used to know,
They still had a budget.
they did. I bet it was a big budget though.
Still had a budget.
Yeah. Who's the sheriff down there now? Do you know, by chance? Used to be Daughtry, but I think he's retired now, so.
We work directly with the county manager.
Well, we're gonna do it right to begin with, so,
That's right.
and I
I definitely
appreciate
encourage
that.
that, and we'll continue to also bring some projects throughout. That's one of the things that we bring to the table is just a wealth of knowledge that we're able to share and what people are doing, what
Right.
other folks are doing, what the industry is doing in this specific building type, and the intricacy of that is really important to understand.
All right. Good. Any other questions?
Is the architectural services, are they covered under the funding that we got, or is this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Anything that we can justify to that expense to the building, including civil, geotechnical.
All right. Anybody else?
And one thing to note on that, and that's how we looked at that that percentage number covers the gamut of those, of all disciplines.
Very well. So do I hear a motion that we approve the architectural services with the Schrader Group this evening?
Mr. Chair, I'll make that motion.
Any other comment or discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
So, thank
Thank
you,
you.
sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming from Raleigh.
Yep.
Absolutely.
We hope to see plenty more of you. All right, with that, that brings us to our consent agenda this evening. So our county manager, Mr. Donald Duncan.
Chairman and Commissioners, we have A through K tonight. The first beginning with a budget amendment for Sheriff's Office using their drug seizure money to purchase a vehicle. This drug seizure occurred in partnership with the the DEA and the U.S. Marshals Service, and had to be processed through the courts. And then, of course, the money that we're paying for that is to service the vehicle and maintain it and store it with the Marshal Service. This vehicle is already in service with us with the Sheriff's Department. It was a very nice vehicle. We would not spend taxpayer monies to buy such a nice vehicle, so it's great that we have that. Sheriff was needing a replacement vehicle from him. He drives the oldest vehicle in the fleet by many years, and so he'll keep that as his response vehicle, but this will be a vehicle that he can use day to day, drive back and forth to Raleigh, keep mileage off of his patrol car, things like that. So we're glad that we were able to do that. We probably saved 90% of the cost if we were to buy this vehicle on the street. Also got seizure funds to purchase a drone for the Sheriff's Department. The Commissioners will need to appoint Ed Carswell to the Gamewell Firefighters Relief Board. Approval of the minutes. And then we have a couple budget amendments for the Health Department. We had $5,500 reduced in funding for cervical cancer prevention. We also had a reduction of $7,800 for mortality reduction, but we increased funding for COVID response by $228,000, additional vaccinations. We also had a budget amendment, and Richard can give you more on that, of $5,500 for donations funds to be used toward animal care, buying additional equipment that would go in the new facility. Had an acceptance of the grants award. It's a 50% grant for bulletproof vests reimbursement. We buy the vests and then we send them a bill and they reimburse us. It's about $7,500. And then we don't have this happen every month, but if you want to close a public right-of-way, the Commissioners must approve that. There's been a request to close a 3/10 of a mile section on State Road 1703, Laxton Road. That's down from 1.21 miles. It'll drop to 0.9 miles. The owners of that section of street asked that it be closed and put back into private hands. So, and they filed all that through the DOT. That's their paperwork, not ours. All you do is have to approve it and agree to it if you wish to do that. And then Sheriff's Office is requesting ARPA funding to purchase a 3D crime scanner. This has been used by the SBI on 2 of our most recent shootings that occurred, the one on 321 in Sawmills and outdoors, and then the one in Hudson indoors. And it allows us to preserve a digital image of the crime scene. And it's basically the same software we use now to survey property with, but now it creates a 3-dimensional, essentially a cube that you can see, and it will detail chairs, the locations of organic objects, weapons, anything you can think of. It builds a 3-dimensional model of that room and preserves that crime scene as a digital image, which will be a handy thing for us in the future, unfortunately. So we've had to call upon it on the SBI. There's one in the western part of the state, so this would give us one of our own. And it is covered under those funds, so nothing out of your budget. And I'll try to answer any questions you may have.
All right, anybody have any questions? Hearing none, I'll ask what the pleasure of the board is this evening in adopting our consent agenda.
Mr. Chair, I move that we accept this evening's consent agenda as the county manager is presented.
All right. Any other comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. And that brings us to the end of our meeting this evening and time, other than going into a closed session. So I'd like to make a motion that we enter into a closed session pursuant to General Statute 143-318.11A4 to discuss matters relating to the location or expansion of industries or other businesses in the area served by this public body, and pursuant to General Statute 143-318.11A6 to consider the qualifications, competence, performance, character, fitness, conditions of appointment, or conditions of initial employment for an individual public officer or employee or prospective public office or employee, or to hear or investigate a complaint, charge, or grievance by and or against an individual public officer or employee with the county attorney, county manager, deputy county manager, county clerk, EDC director, chief finance officer, and ICMA fellow. So having that motion, I'll Call the question. All in favor of going into this closed session, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that motion carries. And so we will enter into our closed session at this time. I'd like to thank you for being here this evening and thank those who have watched my TV and appreciate you being here. And have a good evening.